So unit two, we'll look at literature review. We'll explore what literature review is by definition and look at what literature review contains. So by definition, when talking about literature review, we're looking at a comprehensive summary of the existing body of research. So we're looking at a review of relevant studies that make up what we call the empirical review, what others have done. Literature review also explores theories. You know what theories are? Theories are concepts that others have developed that are being used time and again to validate certain findings. Also, literature review is also used to determine what kind of research method you're going to use. So literature review has so many purposes. It will give you a background context of the topic. It will give you the debates surrounding a particular topic and the gaps that exist in the literature. It also gives you themes. A good literature review also underpin theoretical and conceptual frameworks of the study. It also justify your research by demonstrating its relevance and originality. It is through literature review that we're going to base our foundation for a methodology that will be used. So just a literature review itself will give you a framework upon which your research will be hinging. Literature review has three. We have the general literature review, the empirical review, the theoretical review, and the conceptual framework. So now, before we look at those types of reviews, we need to understand basics of conducting a literature review. Like you do your assignment, you need to, number one, have credible sources. These could be Google Scholar, books, journals, conference papers, and reports. So the steps that we use when we want to identify or to conduct a search, number one, use key terms to search. Is what we call mind mapping. When doing a research, you do a mind map where you're going to put the key terminologies, specific words that you are related to your topic. For instance, if you're dealing with load shedding and productivity of SMEs, you're going to look at what? Load shedding, panel data on the preference of or how long load shedding has been in Zambia. SMEs, which SMEs you're looking at in Zambia that exists is construction. So you need to define the keywords in your search engines. You need to use academic databases. So now you utilize Google Scholar, you utilize PubMed, Gesto, all these are credible sources. Then you also need to refer to bibliographies. You need to check references that are relevant. These are credible sources, so you need to have those journal articles, some of them from paid for sites. You also need to combine keywords and or when you're coming up with good topics. You also need to evaluate the sources. How credible are they? How relevant are they? How recent are they? Because some of the researches that we do, if they're outdated, you end up um, not having relevance for a particular study at hand. So the other part we need to also do when you're conducting literature review, we need to identify themes and debates and gaps. So once you are done with the sources, the next step is to analyze the key themes. The themes are simply recurring topics or ideas in the literature review. The debates, you need to look at the viewpoints, where they are agreeing, where they're disagreeing. Okay, those are very important. You also look at the gaps. By gaps, we're looking at where little or no research has been conducted and what you're going to do about it. So literature review is basically about filling what? Filling up gaps. So you need to look at that. And also trend analysis. You need to look at the patterns of research and methodology. Look at what research methodology was used, all right? And emerging patterns that are there. Then step number three, you need to outline the literature review itself. We can use any of these four approaches. Chronological approach, where you're going to organize literature based on the order of publication, which one came first. We need to highlight the evolution of ideas over time. This is how computers came between the period of so and so, and later on we evolved. So that's chronological order. This is useful when you're dealing with historical perspectives of a topic. can use a thematic approach. Thematic approach usually takes account of studies based on recurring themes. It will allow you to compare different perspectives on key issues. These could be suitable for understanding the relationship between different studies. Okay, so if we're dealing with sub-Sahara um, countries in terms of farming, okay, so you're going to look at relationships between these fields of study. You can also use what we call a methodological approach, where you're going to compare different methodologies that were used. There'll be qualitative or quantitative approaches, and you want to understand the strengths and limitation that was posed in each of these methodologies. Lastly, but not the least, you can use what we call theoretical approach. In theoretical approach here, you're going to focus basically on the different theoretical perspectives that were used. By so, we mean you are going to explore how different theories were applied in a particular topic. So that would be relevant. So now, you now go into writing the actual literature review. Like you do, your assignments is not any different. Start with the introduction. Introduction should give you an overview of the topic, the purpose of the literature review, the key concepts that you're going to have. You go to the main body. You need to present a critical analysis. So literature review is not only about copying and pasting what others have done, but critically analyzing what pieces of data they brought onto um, the body of knowledge. You need to organize the sources. This should be based on structure, chronological, thematic, like we mentioned, methodological, and theoretical. You also need to discuss the similarities that exist and differences that exist between the pieces of data that have been gathered. Look at the debate. You're critiquing the data. So you also identify the gaps in the research and integrate your own thought to make what we call cohesive argument. So after getting this here a little, this here a little, you're now giving your own perspective. Then go to your conclusion. All chapters should have an introduction and a conclusion, be it chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. The conclusion will give you a summary of key findings from the literature review. Here, you must highlight the gaps now in the literature and where need for further studies must exist. You also must justify the relevance of the current study within the context of your topic. Why is this study relevant? And for your school purposes, the Harvard referencing system is what uh, you'll be using. You also need to learn how to use the APA referencing system. I think I'll demonstrate later on. A computer has this way of having references that are tracked automatically. If you're using the same reference, it will be tracked it will be updating in the reference list. Issues of integrating sources. So we also need to learn paraphrasing. So since we'll be using thematic analysis here, and most of you are using different sources and AI, so you must learn how to paraphrase, how to get direct quotes. At what points do we have to directly quote and synthesize information that comes from multiple sources? So when you're citing individuals who are several more than three, John, Mary, April, Matthew, you can say John et al., meaning and others. So you need to also learn how to do those citations. So avoid plagiarizing work by properly attributing the ideas to the original authors. Conceptual framework. Now, what is a conceptual framework and theoretical framework? These are two other key important uh, um, ingredients in our literature review that we need to talk about on their own. Theoretical framework, what does it do? Okay, anyone? What is a theoretical framework? So when you're dealing with the theoretical framework, here we are basically looking at, okay, let me start with the conceptual framework. Conceptual framework basically gives you a foundation of understanding how the variables relate to each other. It'll give you the key concepts and the linkages. We can have a logic framework, which will give you, based on the um, research objectives, how each variable is interlinked to the other. So a conceptual framework is very important because it will ensure that the research remains focused and systematic. The conceptual framework is very important because it is a structured representation of your research problem. It actually breaks down the research problem into the core components. It's actually the conceptual framework that upon which the whole research hinges. It will define the key relationships and will provide a visual or theoretical representation of how the variables interact. It will help you understand the scope and focus of your research. So conceptual framework will also have a number of components. We have what we call the dependent variables and independent variables. So why is the conceptual framework important? It will guide your research design. It will clarify the relationships. It will also help to support the hypothesis if you have any, and it will enhance validity. So conceptual framework has many variables that we must understand. So we have what we call the dependent variables and the independent variables. We also have the moderating variables and the mediating variables. So I'm going to show you a sample of a conceptual framework, but first of all, you must understand the component of the conceptual framework. So we talked about the independent variable, which is the factors that influence the dependent variables. We also have the dependent variables, which is the outcome. The input is the independent variables. The outcome is the dependent variable. So I'll come up with just some logic framework so that you understand. Something like this. You put arrows if you want. Is my screen clear?
Yes, it's clear.
So we have the outcome, which is the dependent variable, called this DV. The input, the factors that influence the dependent variables, you can call that the IV, dependent variables. So if we, for instance, we're looking at a study of um, employee performance. So employee performance may include independent variables like training, leadership, and motivation. So these are inputs: training, motivation, and what? And leadership style. Then we have the dependent variable, which is the outcome we want to measure, which is employee what? Performance or productivity. So this is the outcome. Then we also have a moderating variable, which is a factor that will affect the strength or the direction of the relationship. We also have mediating variables. These are factors that will explain why the dependent variable influences. So here we can call this a moderating variable. Moderating variable. So collectively, this is what we call a conceptual framework. Conceptual framework is very important. It does quite a lot. It will help you understand the core um, essence of the research, the relationships that are there. It will also help you define what research design you're going to use. It will also provide you clarification on the relationships that are here, the interconnections. It will eliminate the ambiguity that research process may have. It is from these research hypotheses that we derive our hypothesis. It also enhances validity. So it will give you a visual representation. Conceptual framework is illustrated through the diagram showing relationships. So you can see our independent variable leadership style. Our dependent variable is what? Employee productivity. But we also have a mediator in between there, which we can call satisfaction. So a mediator or mediating variable is simply the intermediary that will explain why there's a causal relationship there. So Mediating variable is job satisfaction. So job when training is done and employees are satisfied, there will be high employee performance. When it's motivation, but they are satisfied. So it's a condition and environment under which that will take place. Okay. So we having talked about that, we can just quickly go to an exam scenario where we're given a conceptual framework here. So you can see that conceptual framework. So I need you to identify which one is our dependent variable, which one is our independent variable from there, and what hypothesis can we develop from that? Are you able to see um, the screen? So can somebody help? Which one is our dependent variable and our independent variable?
I think our independent variable, we could have leadership.
Okay.
Leadership should be one of the independent variables. So
Okay.
maybe the
Yes, leadership.
dependent variable,
So we have.
like the performance, right? Because if you have good leadership,
Mhm.
if you have leadership, I think that should have an effect on the